Hello, and thank you for joining us here on the Neutral Zone. I am Phil Milani, joined as always by my trusty sidekick, my partner in crime. Really, the best way to describe this person is my everything. It's at Eric Delisle.
Phil, great
Eric,
to see you. Great to see you.
we finally have arrived. It's draft week, and
Woo.
this is the episode that everybody's been waiting for.
That's right. We talked to George Payton. He told us exactly who the Broncos are picking, and we're going to reveal it in the final 10 minutes of this show. Not telling you exactly when, so you'll have to listen to the whole dang thing.
Yeah. We did hear from George Payton last week in his press conference. A lot of theories about what people were reading between the lines there. And a lot of people are convinced the Broncos are going to take a quarterback now.
Yeah, I mean, I am. Phil, if there was like a little station where you could get on board the hype train, I not only got on the train, I opened the door to the conductor's booth and I was like, "You got any room in here?" And then I said, "Choo choo."
You're driving the train now.
Exactly. We are full speed ahead toward QB town.
Okay. Well, on this episode, we're going to go over our dream situations. What's an ideal situation for the Broncos here, as we're just a day away from the draft now. And then we'll also go over a couple of situations, because I think when you just look at these first 9 picks, the draft could really swing one way or another, depending on what the 49ers do at 3 and then what the Falcons do at 4.
Those pesky 49ers, Phil.
Yeah. Who knows what they're doing?
I know.
Yeah. They've been playing things close to the vest. You know, Kyle Shanahan, some interesting comments earlier this week about what they might do. Really a lot of mystery with what the 49ers are going to do.
So John Lynch is a former Bronco, obviously. Kyle Shanahan is the son of a esteemed Broncos coach. Don't you think they should be doing Denver a favor and just kind of setting up the Broncos to do what they want? I mean,
that's what I think, but who knows?
stop making it so hard on us.
You would think, though, that the Broncos would have some idea, just like based off those relationships, maybe just what direction. No.
So. I think they probably know that they're taking a quarterback. And other than that, we heard George Payton said he reads mock drafts, which means he's probably also reading some of these reports that are coming out.
I think that George Payton said he also is a big fan of the neutral zone.
I did hear him say that too. That was in your one-on-one conversation with him, I think.
Or like maybe it was off camera. He said something like that.
Something like that. It might have been. I wasn't rolling. That's my fault. But I mean, Phil, who knows if anyone will be alive by the time the draft starts? So we're just going to enjoy the time we have together today.
That's why I look forward to doing the podcast every week, because I know that this could be it. This could be the last time. So
yeah, and if this is all the time we have, Phil, I want to spend it with you.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. I feel the same way. Yeah. Eric, we'll wrap up the show with some bold predictions. What's a bold prediction? If there's one way to describe what we do here on the Neutral Zone, it's bold predictions. We never hedge.
Yeah, I hear you are thinking that a quarterback from Clemson could go first.
That's what I some people are saying that.
Yeah, but you're ready to lock it in.
Yeah, some people are saying. We'll also get to a few voicemails, Eric, at the end. Henry from San Diego, he agrees with me, so we'll play the voicemail a little bit later on.
That's why we're putting it at the end.
Yeah, that's the tease, and then the Peyton.
If you agree with Eric, you get to go at the beginning of the show. If you agree with Phil, we stick you toward the back.
Well, I just know people will stick around for it. That's what I'm.
Got it. Yeah.
That's the thought process there. We also got some nice emails, Eric, this week. We like to make this a show for the people, by the people, and we encourage people to send in their emails. Got a nice one from Kevin Elliott. He is from Hoover, Alabama, but he grew up in Greeley. He says he likes to listen to the Neutral Zone when he takes his dog Max around the neighborhood.
Shout out, Max.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I hope Max is being a good boy right now. Kevin, thank you so much for your email. Said that he really liked hearing from Steve Atwater. Said that a hard moment in his childhood was after Super Bowl 12. He was 10 years old. He was sobbing underneath his bed after the loss. I hear you. I hear you, Kevin.
Yeah. I mean, you were Super Bowl 12. So you were in your early 30s at that point, Phil?
Yes.
Late 20s. Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a really nice email included a couple of photos. Maybe we could share those on the Broncos podcast Twitter. Maybe we'll share some of those photos. I don't know. He did say, though, that he felt like I was all about the feels.
Yeah.
Eric. And then he said that you really understand the business of football. What did you think about that?
The facts. I think that that's a fair assessment. You Phil, grew up in the heart of Broncos country. You've lived and you've died with this team. They were your childhood idols. So I think you probably have an emotional connection. Not that I don't care about how the team does or anything like that, but my connection is more recent, Phil, within the last 5 or 6 years. So I think that's fair. And obviously I'm correct about the analytical side of things. So I think that's very on point.
Would you say that I'm an emotional person, though? Would you say that?
Yes, I would say that.
I do tend to get emotional. I suppose that's true. Eric, we also got another email from Brady Johnson.
We're not done with Kevin's email, Phil.
Oh, sorry. Okay, fine. Go back to it.
For people listening at home, Kevin, he wrote a nice long email, lots of good nuggets, and
he called it a novel. It
was
good. It was good.
Yeah. One draft thing, he said quarterback, tackle, or corner, no matter what. I like the idea of that. But Phil, my favorite part of his email is he said that he attended a game in Indianapolis on Thursday night a few years ago. For those who don't remember, I think Trevor Siemian started that game, got hurt. Brock Osweiler came in and led the team to win. He said, Phil, you walked right by him and his son. And
after they took the picture.
And he said, I had never noticed. Yeah, he said, I noticed you were taller than I realized, probably because I'd only seen you standing next to Mason before that. That's, of course, former colleague Andrew Mason. It's nice, Phil, that you're finally getting acknowledged for being as tall as you are.
Yeah,
7-footers deserve their day in the sun, Phil.
A few weeks ago, maybe like a month ago, I interviewed George Payton in the hallway at the Broncos facility. And after the interview was over, a few days later, he said that he saw the interview and he was like, we can't be doing interviews where we're just standing side by side. He was like, you dwarfed me. I apologize, but when you're 7'4", you tend to do that.
Exactly. And then the last part of Kevin's email, I just thought this was nice, Phil, and I think how a lot of people feel. He says, the Broncos are part of my DNA, my autobiography. You bring the details of this wonderful ongoing story each week. I'm grateful for that. Do your best and bring your Broncos energy because we're listening. Phil,
that was nice.
I try to bring the energy.
Yes. I try to bring that energy. I bring the energy.
You do. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're grumpy.
That's energy, though.
Yeah.
Grumpiness is energy.
Yeah. But sometimes your grumpiness is like down. You go down.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, thank you for the email.
That was a very nice email. I appreciate all the sentiment there. He also said something like, most people don't realize that this is still a job. And, it's certainly a job having to just like always correct you. You know what I mean? Eric, I'm always correcting you. It's a job.
Yeah, wasn't it last week that you were saying Zach Wilson beat a ranked Boise State team twice? That Boise State team was not ranked either time. So that's kind of a fun fact.
No, that was not the miss. Both times Boise State was ranked. It's just that his junior season, Zach Wilson did not play in that game. Both times Boise State was
supervisor
ranked.
Ben Swanson said Boise State was not ranked on either occasion when he talked to me.
The previous 2 times BYU has played Boise State, both times Boise State ranked. It's just that as a junior, Wilson did not play in that game.
I would just take everything you hear from Phil with a grain of salt. Tennessee that season lost to Georgia State. But Wilson still went on the road and beat an SEC team. What I said was fact, Eric.
It's fact.
Yeah.
Okay. So
well, watch out. He might beat Vanderbilt next.
So Kevin, thank you very much for listening. Hopefully we'll try and keep them a little bit shorter because he said he had to do an extra loop so that he could finish the show. So we got to tone it down a little bit. One last email to get to here from Brady Johnson. He says, great show. I was curious what you would think about a potential trade for Teddy Bridgewater, Eric.
It's intriguing because Teddy's about as consistent as they come, a veteran player. I think he would fit well. I would, at this point, we're recording this on a Tuesday, Phil. I would wait until after the draft to see what happens, and that doesn't mean even if they get a quarterback with their first round pick that I'm opposed to it. I think Teddy could still be a valuable veteran leader to that rookie in the locker room. So not opposed to that. I think he's probably the best option left out there right now. But at this point, I would just wait to see after the draft what your options are. No point in rushing it now.
Yeah, and I think the connection between George Payton and Teddy Bridgewater from their Minnesota days, I think that there's a natural fit there. George Payton, obviously very familiar with Teddy Bridgewater. So I do think the Broncos, no matter what happens this weekend, want competition at the quarterback spot. No matter what happens, they're going to be adding a quarterback. It's just what level and how much is that person going to push Drew Lock? Doesn't mean that they're going to have to trade Drew Lock. Not sure about that, but they're definitely going to be adding a quarterback. So let's see what happens in the draft. And then maybe that picture will become a lot clearer. Maybe definitely a guy like Teddy Bridgewater would make sense after this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I could foresee a scenario where, say, you take a quarterback at 9 or wherever they get that guy in the first round, where you then maybe send Drew to a team for a 4th or 5th round pick that thinks, hey, we can still get the best out of him. And then you send a 4th or a 5th to Carolina for Teddy Bridgewater and just have a veteran in this locker room. Just I think, and we'll get to this, but I think it would be tough to ask Drew to kind of mentor a young guy when he really wants to be a long-term starting quarterback.
Yeah, but the flip side to that is that you could just ask them to compete and see what you have in Drew. I mean, the flip side to that is you keep Drew around because you still don't quite know what you got in him. And if he goes out and plays really well, either you stick with him and then trade the pick you just made, or you've got a more valuable asset. There's always two sides to every coin.
Yeah.
So
if they take a guy at 9, that guy is the future quarterback. He's not going to be they're not going to trade that guy.
We'll have to see, Eric. We'll have to see.
The Arizona Cardinals did not let Josh Rosen and Kyler Murray compete with each other.
Yeah, I think they traded Rosen before that, right? When did they trade Rosen?
I think they drafted Kyler first and then traded Rosen that day.
Well, I still think the Broncos like Drew Lock. The Rosen, I think there was like a severed relationship there. They just didn't want any part of that.
They tweeted out after the combine, Josh is our guy.
We know how that stuff works, Eric. We know how that works.
I mean, that's how you're basing your feelings about the Broncos and Drew Lock on the same sort of pre-draft comments. Everything could be a lie, Phil. Everything we know.
Everything could be a lie. That is true.
So
I still think they liked it. I think that they liked it. Eric, one final thing that we forgot to mention is that we'll hear from ESPN senior writer Jeff Legwold. He always puts out his top 100 prospects. Last year, he got 84 of the 100 correct. So
that's pretty good. I got 97, but 86 is pretty good.
Yeah, 84 is what I said.
Yikes.
Thanks for listening.
Let
me just put that one down. One correction. Okay. Yep. We'll just keep a tally here throughout the. So we will hear from him. He has some good thoughts on what the Broncos might do at the quarterback position, including what we were just talking about. Would they keep Drew Lock if they picked up one of these guys? You'll also hear from Jeff Legwold, ESPN senior writer, and that sounds like a pretty good show to me, Eric.
Yeah, let's get after it.
All right, let's start with our dream scenario for the Broncos here as we record this on a Tuesday, one day away from the draft coming up here. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, I think it's Justin Fields somehow falling to 9. And this is a dream scenario that I don't think is completely out of the realm of possibility. I think it's still unlikely. Um, but I just think out of the 3 guys that could be available, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, we know that Justin Fields has the most, I mean, I think you can argue he has the most experience. He has been the back-to-back Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year. He was 3rd in Heisman Trophy voting in 2019. Just a really impressive player. As we heard George Payton say, really, really high upside, a little bit raw, but more experience than Trey Lance. And to get him at 9, even if you still believe in Drew Lock and think, hey, Drew can get better and be good enough to lead this team to the playoffs, I think it's too much to pass on a guy like Justin Fields. And if you could somehow get him without giving up any assets, without having to trade up, that would be great. And Phil, in this league, you need a quarterback. We heard George Payton say that you can't just get by with kind of the average player. You always need to look to upgrade if that's who you are. And then I would add, kind of on day 2, I know there's kind of buzz about running backs or edge rushers or whatever. I would really like an inside linebacker. I just think that's the one area where the Broncos could make a big step, especially in the pass coverage game. If you could find somebody that could cover Travis Kelce or Darren Waller, I know that's not an easy ask, but that would be great. And I saw a recent mock draft, Phil, where Jamin Davis from Kentucky falls all the way to 40. I mean, if you could end up after round 2 with Justin Fields and Jamin Davis, that's about as good as you could possibly ask for.
Yeah, that would be a dream scenario. I mean, you're talking about 2 impact players on both sides of the ball in that situation. So, yeah, that would be definitely a dream situation.
And you got to help the defense. Like at 9, if Justin Fields is there, you got to take him, just because who knows if you're picking that high again, who knows what sort of opportunity you have in a future quarterback class. But then at some point, you got to give Vic Fangio's defense the attention. And that's why, if a quarterback's not there at 9, and for me, if it's not Fields or Lance, I would trade back and get more picks and take a defensive guy there. But at the very least, you've got to take a defensive guy in round 2. You can't then take a tackle in round 2 or a running back or whatever, just because, Phil, there is truth to the fact that the higher you draft a player, the better they probably are going to be. And you can't just load up a defense with 3rd-round picks and 4th-round picks, and so on down the line, because so far in Vic Fangio's tenure, Phil, I think you've got Noah Fant, Drew Lock, Dalton Reisner, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. Those are your round 1 and round 2 picks, all 5 of them on offense.
Yeah, I think that Vic is probably telling George, hey, let's get a little bit of help on the other side of the ball. Eric, I do think that Justin Fields is the guy for any sort of dream scenario. Him falling to 9, I think that would be an absolute dream. But just to play a little bit of a devil's advocate here to you, I do think that there's a strong case for Patrick Surtain. I think that he's probably the best defender in this draft. And I think that people will say, well, the Broncos just went out and got a bunch of cornerbacks at the in free agency. But I think if you look at it, Bryce Callahan only has 1 more year left on that. And then the deal that Kyle Fuller signed is just a 1-year deal. So I do think that long-term, to be able to get the best defender in the draft, you got to like that. I mean, there's something to be happy about if you are going to get a guy like Patrick Surtain at 9. I would seriously look at that if the quarterbacks were already off the board. I think that he would make a lot of sense. And I also think that you would find a way to get him involved as a rookie. I mean, we know that depth at the cornerback position has really bitten the Broncos late in each of the past 2 seasons. And so you're always going to want some added depth there. And I also think let's just try to find a way to get more athletes on the field. So you're talking about playing more nickel, more dime. If you could add a guy like Patrick Surtain, an Alabama product, I think that you would be really happy there. The other dream scenario to me would be moving back. I mean, I think that if you could, what is it that Peyton say, get more darts? I think if you could get more darts, whether it's this year in the second round or in the third round, or building more assets for next season, I would not be opposed to that. I think fans would be a little bit upset, but I would not be. That wouldn't be a dream scenario, but I would be pleased with it too, just because I do think there's a lot of talent at the back of this draft that I think could come in and help right away. A guy like J.C. Horn, if he's somehow available a little bit further back, I think would make a lot of sense, and I'd be happy with that too.
Yeah, no, I actually think that if a quarterback, here's why I am with the quarterbacks. If Fields and Lance are on the board, I know we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but if Fields and Lance are on the board, I'm definitely taking Fields. If Fields is there, not there, and Lance is there, I'm probably going to take Lance, but I have to think about it a little bit. But if both those guys are gone, Phil, I would rather trade back than just take a defender straight up at 9. And I would be surprised if Denver stays at 9 and takes a guy, just because I think there's so much, you could be taking the first defensive player at 9. And so there's so much talent that's going to be in the teens there that if you could add an extra second round pick and get the difference between J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain is not big enough that you wouldn't also want that second round pick probably. Or, if you could get Jalen Phillips, that rusher from Miami, like that's an interesting pick, or Micah Parsons. I mean, there's a lot of different, or say Rashawn Slater at tackle falls to 15 or 16. Those are all really intriguing elements. And like you mentioned, Phil, the dart, Peyton's comment about the darts, I think that's always going to be who he is and what he leans toward. And, his overall philosophy is not going to change. So if they think at 9, there's 3 guys that are about the same that could help them, or 5 guys or whatever, 5 guys at 3 is as Kyle Shanahan. 5
guys at 9. Yeah, you're going for a late night snack.
Yeah, dinner at 5 guys for George Payton. Then they're going to move back, I think. And that to me is just the smart thing. It might not, again, like you mentioned, it's not going to draw the headlines. It's not going to be get the best draft grade out there. But if you have, instead of 3 top 100 picks, if you could get 4 this year and add another one next year, every top 100 pick should be a starter. I mean, that's just what the expectation should be. So for Denver to do that, I think that would be just as good. So in terms of those scenarios, I would rank quarterback, trade back, and then stick at 9 and pick a guy like Surtain. Even though he's super talented, that would probably be my last choice of those 3.
A lot of that has to depend on how they have these guys ranked, because if they do think that Horn is that close to Surtain, then yeah, obviously try and move back. My feelings this year, maybe more than ever, has like sort of evolved like through these last couple of months, because I do think that there is a lot of value in taking a blue chipper, like if you could get a guy like Surtain and just say, we're drafting this guy and he's going to be a shutdown quarterback for his entire career here in Denver. There's a lot of value in that. So if you think he's that kind of a player, then I think you got to be like, I'm okay just saying, let's just turn in our card and let's just get this guy. And we're going to have a really quality player for a long time. But if you think that he's not that clear cut ahead of everybody else, then yeah, move back. And you talk about Peyton's personality. Everything he's done so far has been really measured. I mean, nothing has been like really outlandish. He's not gone out and made a huge splash. Everything's been sort of measured. Everything's been very calm, calculated. And I feel like that is who he is. And there's a lot to like about that. And so I just have a hard time seeing him like saying, I love Fields, I'm going to trade up and we're going to go after and get him. That would surprise me, I think. I'm wondering what you think, Eric. What's the likelihood that one of those quarterbacks will still be there?
Still be there at 9?
Yeah.
I think if Mac Jones goes 3, I think there's a really good chance that Lance or Fields is there at 9. Just because it sounds like from everything we're hearing that the Falcons want to take Kyle Pitts. It sounds like how much the 49ers paid for the 3rd overall pick might stop teams like the Bears or Patriots from moving up to 4 or 5 or 6. And so then you figure, well, say New England decides to move from 15 to 7 and they go up there and they get one of those 2 guys. Well, then, then you've got a pretty good chance that one of those guys is going to be left at 9. So I really do think that if Mac Jones goes 3, one of Trey Lance or Justin Fields will still be on the board. And at that point, it's a question of, do you take the chance that, say you decide Fields is your guy? Say, I'm acting as the GM in this case because I like Fields. I've got to decide, do I move up to 7 to get him, or do I wait and see? Or, do I decide, hey, getting Lance at 9 is almost as good, and I'd rather do that and keep my 40th overall pick, or 71st, I think is the other one. That's what you have to consider. But Phil, I mean, with these picks, we heard George Payton say, and we've heard really good GMs who trade down a lot say, if you're a really good GM, maybe you hit on 60 or 70% of your picks. It's not like if you're a great GM, you're hitting on 100. And so
play the odds. Just
having more picks, you might think that Surtain is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and you could still be a bust because you still have a chance that he's just not going to pan out. And so if you can get a guy and then also add another player, like now you've doubled the chance, I would think. I don't quite know how the probability works there, but you've increased the chance at least that that you're going to get a starter out of one of those two players. So to me, that's something that's worth considering in that spot when you're deciding, do we stay at 9 or do we trade down? But yeah, overall, I would be really surprised if they go up to 4. I think that would be a big move that would have that would kind of sacrifice next year. But if you were, I mean, Phil, say you get Justin Fields or Trey Lance, and you're, Drew Lock plays part of the year, or whatever veteran you have plays part of the year, and then that guy comes in and you're okay. You end up league average, and you have the 15th pick next year. And instead of having to, instead of not having it because you traded up, now you get to add another top 20 player to a young team. I mean, that's really intriguing for the future of this organization.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's just recap here our dream scenarios here. For you, it's Fields at 9, somehow falling. I think that would be a dream scenario as well. But just to play devil's advocate, I'll say Surtain at 9 or trading back. I kind of like the idea of getting a guy like the top defender, but I also get trading back. So
good hedge there.
Thank you. I was waiting for you to hit me on that.
You picked 2 dream scenarios and then also agreed with mine. That's a nice, smart.
Pretty good, huh?
You're emotional, so the people love you.
Pretty good. Eric, let's get into our next topic here, which we kind of just touched on, but let's go over a couple of scenarios. And instead of our dream scenarios, these are maybe a little bit more likely, I would say. Let's start out with one where Mac Jones is taken at 3. That's a lot of what we've been hearing, is that Mac Jones is the 49ers pick. That's the guy they went up to get. So in this situation, Mac Jones goes 3, and then Trey Lance goes 4 to the Falcons. They start preparing for their future life after Matt Ryan. There some talks about them trading Julio Jones possibly. So maybe they're ready to turn the page and say, let's start building for our future. They take Trey Lance. How do you see that affecting the Broncos?
Yeah, well, I mean, if Mac Jones goes at 3, I think that is really good news for Denver, just because now you have 2 guys in Trey Lance and Justin Fields that could end up being available. Maybe you think about making an offer to the Falcons at 4. If Trey Lance goes off the board at 4, whether it's to the Falcons or somebody that they've traded with, I think probably if you're the Broncos, you hope that somebody trades up with the Falcons and takes Trey Lance, because then that's one fewer team that's going to trade up to get him. Like say New England moves up to 4 to get Trey Lance. Now they're no longer going to come up and jump you again. But I think in that scenario, Phil, if the goal is to get Justin Fields, you would have to consider moving up to 7 with Detroit. I think that's probably the only way to guarantee it, because I would think other teams like New England, Chicago would start calling Detroit. Carolina could take Justin Fields at 8. And so let's say in that scenario, you stand pat, you don't trade up to 7, even though I think in that scenario, if it goes Mac Jones, Trey Lance at 4, I think the Broncos would go to 7. I think that they would make that move. That's one day 2 pick that you've got to give up probably. that to me is worth it. I think the Broncos would view that as worth it. George Payton has said if there's somebody good enough, we're going to go up and get that player. So, and again, if I think the only way you would lose Fields in that case is if somebody else traded up, and in that case, then you trade back.
Got it. Okay, so in this situation, Mac Jones goes 3, Trey Lance 4. You think that means Broncos are moving up to 7 and taking Justin Fields at 7 with a trade with the Lions.
Yeah.
And probably to do that, they're going to have to give up their second-round pick. You would be okay with that?
I think that probably is what they would have to do. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to scenario number 2 here, and that's where the 49ers have tricked all of us. Justin Fields is the pick at number 3.
That's intriguing. That would surprise me, Phil. It would cut me to the core. It would hurt me. So let's say in this one that Fields goes there. We'll say Trey Lance doesn't go 4 to the Falcons. In this case, maybe they decide they're going to go with Kyle Pitts. So you get to that 7th pick, and Mac Jones and Trey Lance are still on the board. I'm not quite comfortable trading up to 7 for Trey Lance. I think he is worth it maybe if he gets to 9, but I don't think that he is. I think it's just too much to give up an extra starter, because when you talk about the 40th pick, Phil, you're thinking about a Cortland Sutton, you're thinking about a Dalton Reisner, you're thinking about a Drew Lock, a Derek Wolfe. We could go on here with some second-round picks. Those are some of the more recent ones, but so that's what you're considering. Is Justin Fields worth sending Dalton Reisner to a team? If he can be the franchise guy, you might really like Dalton Reisner, but yeah, of course he's worth that. If Trey Lance is a developmental guy that's not going to play for a year, and you just don't know what's going to happen, to me that's less worth it. And I would rather take the chance of sticking with Drew and seeing what he can do as opposed to sacrificing another starter. So in that case, Phil, I would kind of let things play out. And 2 things could happen there. Either a team like New England could trade up to 7 and take Lance, and in that case, Phil, I would trade back, because I don't believe in Mac Jones enough that I'm going to take him at 9. So I would let a team like Chicago come up and give you a lot of picks to move back if they want Mac Jones there at 9. Or if Trey Lance is on the board at 9, I would go with him.
So if Justin Fields goes at number 3 to the 49ers, you're saying either trade back or Lance at 9.
At 9, if he's on the board, but not worth trading up in my mind. Okay. And again, if Lance is gone, but Mac Jones is the last guy on the board, and in New England or Chicago are fighting against each other, that's when you get the big bucks for trading back, is when a quarterback's involved. So maybe you pick up a second-round pick this year and a second-round pick next year, or maybe a first-round pick. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe drive the price up. Okay, and then let's go over our third situation here, and that's if the 49ers take Trey Lance at number 3.
Yeah, I saw somebody say the other day that this is the best case scenario for Denver. I don't buy that. I think that this is it's obviously not as bad if you want Fields. It's not as bad as if Fields gets taken at 3, but I think if Trey Lance gets taken at 3, there's a good chance someone's going to go up to 4 or 7 to get Fields. And again, I don't know that I want to make the move to 4. I think that's just too aggressive. And so I think you just kind of have to cross your fingers and hope there that the Falcons don't like Fields, or that the Falcons want Kyle Pitts or want Penei Sewell or Jamar Chase or whoever. Because again, I just think 4 is too much to sacrifice. But then once you get past that, it kind of goes to the same situation where if Fields gets to 7, then again, I would try to move up in that area. Maybe a New England, say New England trades up to 7 and they want Mac Jones. Well, now that's maybe a scenario where Fields could fall to 9 without you having to move up. So maybe in that way, it's a good situation, but I just think that one makes me a little bit more nervous. So I think the Broncos definitely want the 49ers to take Mac Jones.
So what are your options there then? You say you would do Fields at 7
Fields at 7,
or
and
trade back?
yeah, but I think in that case maybe there's a little bit of a better possibility that he's on the board at 9.
Oh, if Lance goes.
I think so, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that the one guy that seems to be an outlier amongst the top quarterbacks is Mac Jones. It seems to me that most teams have him number 5 out of the top 5 guys, except maybe the 49ers. So if the 49ers have moved up to 3 and they take this guy, now you're talking about 2 quarterbacks left with just 5 picks to go.
Yeah.
So I think that is obviously the best situation is when there's still 2 guys that the Broncos would be really high on and only 5 picks to go.
And the good news there is, Phil, at least as it stands, the Falcons and Broncos are probably the only 2 teams really considering a quarterback. The Panthers might be, the Lions might be, but it's probably just the Broncos and Falcons. And so you think, well, if the draft order stayed the same, we'll get one of those 2 guys. But of course, we know it doesn't work like that.
We've seen some mocks where the Panthers do take a quarterback, and you're probably saying, wait, what? Didn't they just trade for Sam Darnold? But they haven't agreed to a 5th-year option there. Maybe they're waiting and seeing what they got there. That would be a little surprising to make a trade for a guy and then also draft a quarterback. But who knows? Maybe they really like one of these guys. So I think the fortunate news is that the Bengals and Dolphins definitely don't need quarterbacks. So
it is interesting to me that in all these mocks, and this is what scares me, in all these mocks, I've not once seen the Bengals trade.
Yeah.
And I get that because they want a top caliber player. They want either a Penei Sewell or a Jamar Chase. You want the number 1 guy at one of those positions. But it always seems to happen in the draft that a team that you never expected to move back all of a sudden is the one moving back. And so
for the right price, Eric, you do anything.
Right. And so if, say Mac Jones goes off the board at 3 and Trey Lance goes to the Falcons, if I were the Bengals and somebody were calling me and saying, hey, we're going to give you a couple firsts so we can come get Justin Fields, I'm saying, we'll call Roger Goodell and let him know right now. I mean, so that to me, it's not like if say Mac Jones goes 3 and the Falcons take Kyle Pitts, I'm not sitting back and relaxing for 20 minutes until the Lions go on the clock. I mean, I'm going to be nervous about what the Bengals do at 5, what the Dolphins do at 6, what the Lions do at 7. All that is worth worrying about because you just never know.
Yeah, and I think that hopefully part of what the Broncos are doing right now is trying to get a good feel for what's going on around the league. You're talking to your pro scouts and saying, hey, what do you think about this team? What do you think they're doing here? You're doing a lot of internal mock drafts, that type of thing, just to get a good feel for what the heck might be going on. Let's get on the phone with the Bengals and just see what a price might look like there. All kinds of different situations just so you're prepared to go come Thursday night.
Well, I think in that situation, I would imagine you also talk about compensation. So maybe, the Broncos try out a scenario where you say, okay, we want to go to 7 and Detroit wants 40 this year. And maybe they say, okay, we're okay with that. But maybe then there's a scenario where they say, we want to go to 7 and Detroit wants 40 and a 2nd round pick next year. And that's too much. We're not going to do that. I would think you work through all those sorts of things too, so that in the moment, obviously, like if you're in round 2, round 3, you're trying to trade back in to round 1, you're kind of doing that stuff on the fly. But I would think ahead of the draft, enough about how the first 3 picks are going to unfold or 2 picks that you can kind of imagine some of those scenarios. So I would think George Payton, again, aggressive but not reckless, has an idea of how much he'd be willing to spend to go up and what's worth it.
Totally. I think the best situation then, I think we agree here, is that Mac Jones goes 3 to the 49ers. Let's see what happens with the Falcons. And then maybe you're picking up the phone and deciding what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, if Kyle Pitts goes 4 to the Falcons and then Penei Sewell or Jamar Chase goes 5 to the Bengals. Then if you're the Broncos, I think you're feeling really good, thinking that, hey, one of these guys is going to make it through 4 picks, hopefully.
Yeah. And regardless of all of these things, if they decide that quarterback is not what they want to do right now, you know that a really good player who in a normal draft or maybe in a draft that occurred 10 years ago, prior to all this craziness about the quarterbacks, you're going to get a really good player. You're going to get somebody who would have been a number 3 pick 10 years ago. They're going to be at the Broncos at 9. So.
And, Phil, I know we've talked about this, you and I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast, but, will George Paton make a career-defining decision in year 1? Because if he trades up to take a quarterback, or even if he just takes a quarterback at 9, that guy's going to be linked to him for a long time. And I think that, given the length of his contract, it's quite possible that he could get to draft another quarterback in a few years if it doesn't work out, or certainly sign one. So it's not like we're going to have it's not like George Paton's career as a general manager is tied to 1 pick, but certainly it's a big statement. But the reason I think he's probably not afraid to do that is because if you don't take that guy, your career's tied to it too. I mean, you look at how much the Bears get just absolutely trashed because they passed on Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes for Mitchell Trubisky. Or you think about in 2018, there was a little bit of chatter when the Broncos took Bradley Chubb over Josh Allen, but it wasn't the way that people would make you think now. I mean, there were a lot of people that were just absolutely fired up to get Bradley Chubb. And now it's like, how could you ever have passed on Josh Allen? This was the last straw for John Elway picking quarterbacks. I mean, that becomes part of your reputation too. And so for me, if you're George Paton and you're picking in the top 10, you've just got to do what feels right to you. You can't worry about making a big splash or not, and what that's like for year 1. And he said that in his press conference. He said being a year 1 general manager will have nothing to do with the decisions we make.
The difference, though, in those situations is that they let the guy pass them. They were on the board when the Broncos picked or when the Bears picked. This situation, a little different if you have to go up and get them. Of course, if one of those guys is on the clock, you got to really think about it.
Didn't the Bears go up? Didn't the Bears go up to get Trubisky?
I think they made just a move with the 49ers. Wasn't that the 49ers?
Yeah, they swapped. Yeah, they moved up and traded, I think, a 3rd round pick. Yeah, they traded.
What I'm saying is all 3 of those guys were on the board. Like when the Bears picked,
right,
Trubisky, Mahomes, Watson, they were all on the board. It's out of his control if the price to go up to 4 is like really, really high,
right?
It's a little bit, you don't get knocked too much for that.
But I mean, if it's a 2nd round pick to go to 7 and that 2nd round pick ends up flaming out because it's possible, DeMarcus Walker obviously didn't pan out the way people hoped here. Then you start to think, well, man, a 2nd round pick would have been worth it. Or what if you get to 9 and Trey Lance and Mac Jones are on the board and you decide, we're just not sure about Trey Lance, or like Mac Jones, we're not sure about, and you let both of those guys go by and trade back, and then one of those guys ends up being a star. I mean, then that's why I'm just saying you can't worry about.
You can't hesitate just because it's year 1.
Right. You've got to go forward with your plan. And again, I'm reminding myself of this as much as I'm reminding members of Neutral Zone Nation, Phil, but I've been really vocal about saying this year, at least, you can't criticize, or you can't love part of George Paton's plan and criticize another part of it. So you can't say, hey, I like the idea of bringing Von Miller back and re-signing Justin Simmons, but letting go of Phillip Lindsay was a huge mistake, and not adding Mitchell Trubisky in free agency was a big miss. I think you've got to trust his plan here. And so and I'll remind myself of this after the draft, if his plan is to take a quarterback if they're there, but not trade up to sacrifice future assets, or if his plan is, if one of these guys is on the board, I'll take him, but if another 2 are, we're going to pass on him. I mean, I think you've just got to accept that to some degree, and you can be angry about it in a moment if you want, but I think you've got to believe that he knows what he's doing, and it'll show on the field one way or another. But I won't fault him as a general manager right after the draft if they pass on Trey Lance at 9, for example. I'll certainly be in the press conference, say, hey, what was the thinking here? But I think you've got to believe that he's got a plan. He seems like the guy, Phil, that is thinking a couple steps ahead at all times. And we just got to see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is for sure is that these last couple of months, they've really been doing their work. I mean, they've really spent long hours there. I mean, I think they're in those meetings from like 7 to 9 p.m., like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. I mean, those are long days where you're really going over everything. So hopefully you just stick to that plan and you don't let the emotions of the moment, make the decision. Stick to the plan, trust the process, as they say in Philadelphia, and just move forward that way.
Yeah, Peter King had a quote from George Payton. I don't know where it came from. It might have been during the press conference. Maybe I missed it, but Payton told somebody that he hadn't seen the sun in like a couple of weeks because he's been inside watching film all day.
He's got a nice office with some windows, and you can oversee the practice field. So
you don't buy it.
Does the sun come in that way? I think so.
I know it rises in the east, sets in the west because I watched Beauty and the Beast as a kid, but
yeah,
I'm not great with how the practice facility is situated.
Yeah, the sun sets and it comes right into his office.
Got it.
I think that he's seen the sun.
Good. Okay.
But that's a nice sentiment, though.
Yeah.
You gotta like that. Eric, sometimes I feel like we get a little too in the weeds. Sometimes we talk way too many options.
That's what people want right now, Phil.
There are a lot of options when you're at 9. Like, it kind of can make you go crazy.
But it's a good spot, though. Like a few years ago and I even felt this way last year just because it was really clear the Broncos, or I thought at least, maybe it's just retrospect, but we thought it was really clear the Broncos were going to take a receiver. So we could at least be like, well, is it going to be CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy? But a couple of years ago, Phil, when we were picking at 20 in 2017, it's just a hard conversation to have because you just have no idea how things are going to play out that far down. And so you're kind of like, what direction do we even go in?
When were they picking at 20? Who did they take that year?
Garrett Bowles.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
I mean, there's just, what was that?
Yeah, I was thinking back when they were sitting at 10 and we thought, okay, inside linebacker possibly, and that's when they traded with the Steelers, moved back and got Noah Fant.
We did not have time to record a podcast in between the trade down to 20.
No, we didn't. We didn't do that.
We tried.
Could have been nice.
Yeah. But 9 is a nice spot where you can foreseeably get one of these top guys. I mean, Phil, if we were at 9 in 2017 when Christian McCaffrey was coming out of school, I was going crazy at 20 about go up to number 8 and get him.
Yeah. Not so clear cut this year. A lot of unknown and mystery about some of these guys because a lot of players opted out. So you haven't seen them play football in a long time. You haven't had the combine. You haven't had the face-to-face interactions. It's been a little bit different feel to this draft, I would say.
Yeah.
We'll see. Eric, this sounds like a good time to get to my conversation with Jeff Legwold. We go over a lot of similar types of things. He talks a little bit about how he has the quarterbacks ranked. So let's hear from a different voice here. This is ESPN senior writer, Jeff Legwold. Leggy, thank you so much for taking some time to join us here. I know last year you got 84 of the 100 correct. How is the process different this year for you?
No combine. First time since 1986, I did not go to the combine. So that was a little strange. And just no pro days. I didn't really have the face-to-face time. Frankly, Phil, that's how the teams rolled. I think the Broncos were one of the most active on the pro day circuit. They hit a bunch and maybe among the most in the league. And then you had a team like the Rams essentially say they weren't going to any pro days.
Yeah, we saw George Payton himself go to a lot of those pro days all over the country here. Uh, I know everybody has an opinion about your list. If we want to just dive in, I know most eyes go to the quarterbacks first.
Yeah,
And
always.
you had Zach Wilson as your fourth quarterback on the list, which maybe was a surprise for some people, huh?
Well, I've changed a little with the times. I like to evaluate quarterbacks to how they fit the way the game is played now. I've fully admitted since January that I'm a lot more on board with Trey Lance than some scouts are. But I also know that there are multiple teams in the league that have Trey Lance as the number 2 quarterback on this board. So it's the old 31 flavors argument. It's kind of how you look at them, how you evaluate them, and what you like at the position. I just think, Trevor Lawrence is number 1, obviously. And I think in the big picture with this class, I think all the quarterbacks are going to get overdrafted, above their actual grade. And I think even teams would privately admit that. But I think of the group, Lawrence is really the only one who's ready to play this year. And I think for a player like Trey Lance, I think you select Trey Lance and simply say, you take the Mahomes approach. We don't want him to play this year. We want him to learn. He's only 20 years old, Phil. I mean, he won't even be 21 until next month, May. So you're talking about a guy, if a team takes Trey Lance at the end of his rookie deal, even if you take the 5th year, he's 25 years old. I think he checks the prospect box in so many ways. But, I had Lawrence, Lance, Fields, Zach Wilson, and then Mac Jones. I think 3 of the quarterbacks in my mind have first round grades.
So you think that some teams overvalue a little bit too much and they don't trust their grade?
I think some teams feel the pressure. I mean, I think the Mahomes effect in the league. He's the best quarterback in the league. He's only 25 years old. He's not even to his prime yet. And he's been to 2 Super Bowls. He's been a league MVP. And again, he's at the top of the pyramid. So I think he's even up the ante across the league. And teams admit they take quarterbacks above their grade. It's the only position where you see it happen so often. It is the ultimate draft for need over best player available, because every time a team takes a quarterback, especially in the first round, they are drafting for need right out front, because they're saying this is the player we need. And I find it remarkable. If you talk to a general manager during an NFL season, they'll say, oh yeah, there's 5 or 6 really great quarterbacks in the league. That's what they'll say. And yet those same general managers will treat every draft like there's 5 great quarterbacks in every draft.
Do you feel like a team like the Broncos in the same division as Mahomes, Justin Herbert, you mentioned him, feel even more pressure to say we need a guy who can compete with some of these other talented quarterbacks?
Yeah, Phil, I think they're in a position where you have to figure it out. Are you going to, they obviously address defense and free agency. That's the first impact of, got to get more corners. And at quarterback, I think they're in a unique position because they do like Drew Lock. I've told people for months, the Broncos like Drew Lock more than you do. That's essentially what I say to people. And I think they've proven that. They largely sat out free agency at quarterback. They took a little toe dip in Matthew Stafford to see what the price tag was. And then when they saw what it was, they said, never mind, we're moving on. But they're in a unique position because say they take Trey Lance or Justin Fields or make a move to do it, they would have 2 quarterbacks on rookie contracts. So very little salary cap impact at the most important position on the field. And if Drew Lock plays great in 2021, if he plays really well, then they have the ultimate chips in the game. They could move a quarterback in 2022 to another team if they wanted, have the prospect they like, and recover, Mondo assets in return. Because when, if you're trading a viable quarterback, it's good for you often, to what you get in return. So I think, you wouldn't be taking a player with your first pick who plays this year necessarily, but for your franchise, you may have some really good value down the road if they are correct about Drew Lock.
Looking back at your list here, the top defensive player on there was Patrick Surtain from Alabama. What did you like about his game?
Phil, other guys are faster. Other guys have more of the, tested better and some of those things. I believe he's the most complete player in terms of physically, his understanding of the game, how he's been coached. He is a very advanced player. He'll be a walk-in contributor starter right away.
Do you think the Broncos could still look at cornerback after what they did at free agency? Or, I know that the contract situations after next year make that maybe a possibility.
These days, you can never have enough corners. I mean, every team in the league's in the nickel and dime 70% of the time now. Base defense now is almost a situational look. You got to think, you got to flip the coin a little bit. They should take corners every year. I think it's evolved into that kind of position. And this board is a thin board overall. It's very top heavy. The good players are very good, but once you get to the 5th, 6th, 7th round, it's a thin board. I mean, teams are going to be drafting guys in the 7th round this year they don't have a draftable grade on.
And the last one for you, Leggy, I'll put you on the spot. What do you think happens here at 9 for the Broncos?
Well, the Broncos are in a weird spot, Phil. I mean, they really can't do anything until Atlanta makes a call. If Atlanta takes a quarterback, that changes the landscape a great deal, because now you're saying the Broncos have to like 5 quarterbacks in the top 10. And that would be very rare for a team to have 5 quarterbacks. I can't think of it ever happening where a team had 5 quarterbacks graded in the top 10. So if Atlanta takes a quarterback or trades the pick to a team that does, I think that points the Broncos another direction. Unless, of course, if somehow Trey Lance sort of slips through and starts to come down the board a bit, then I think the Broncos have to take a long look at that. Just, either he or Fields. If one of those guys pops past the number 4 pick, then I think the Broncos have to take a look at that, because, if things go the way they plan, they don't plan on being in the upper half of the first round again. When are you going to take a quarterback again or have the opportunity to? So I think that may play into it as well. And, George is in the first year of a long-term 6-year deal. So, he can approach things that way if he chooses. But I think, his head coach will want as many players as can contribute right now. So I think that's always the balance for a team like the Broncos. What do you do for the current staff and keep building for the future? But I think quarterbacks in play, depending on what the Falcons do at number 4.
Well, we're looking forward to the drama unfolding on Thursday night. Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your insight.
Thanks, Phil. We'll see you.
My thanks to ESPN senior writer Jeff Legwold sharing his top 100. Eric, last year he got 84 of the top 100 right. I don't know about you, but when it's round 3, it gets pretty dicey for me whether or not I've ever even heard of the guy before.
I mean, you had heard of Sir Lloyd Cushenberry III last year.
Yes, I know all the centers all across the definitely all across the SEC. Big 10, Pac-12, yeah. But after that, I don't know the centers.
I mean, yeah, name the last 5 Remington Award winners, please, if you really know this. I mean, after round 1, Phil, it's hard. I mean, even like when KJ Hamler was drafted last year, I was like, wow, that's a surprise. I mean, I knew a little bit about KJ, and he was a guy that we talked about, but it wasn't anyone you thought was going to Denver. And then, Michael Ijamudia, McTelvin Agim, guys that were not really on my radar of people that, it just, when we get to round 3, Phil, I think you have to admit, unless you're studying the draft all the time, and we have other responsibilities, Phil, you've got that fern to take care of. I don't know where it is right now.
Over here it is.
You've got a lot going on with the fern, the orchid, a regular botanist over there, but you just can't know. We're no Daniel Jeremiah. And so I think you just have to accept that in rounds 3 and on, there's a chance you're going to, maybe you take a guy, like a Cushenberry, but also, you could just find somebody you've never heard of, and you got to do some quick research, and then you pretend like you love the pick.
Exactly. Eric, curious though, Legwold had Zach Wilson as his 4th quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that it went Trevor Lawrence for him, then it went Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones. That is the opposite of what a lot of people believe will happen, or just their beliefs in general on how you rank these quarterbacks. Even I know your friend Chris Sims had Zach Wilson number 1 overall.
Yeah, but not in his mock draft. He has Wilson number 2. He has Fields going 32nd. I don't think that's going to happen.
But in his rankings of quarterbacks, he had Zach Wilson. So what do you think? How come the opinions of some of these guys are all over the place?
Well, I mean, you're going to have opinions all over the place with anybody. It doesn't matter what position, what year. I do think the fact that we're seeing more and more quarterbacks that have limited playing time goes into it. And it is interesting to me that everyone just decided at some point, it felt like January or February, everyone just all of a sudden was like, yeah, Zach Wilson's the 2nd best quarterback, and we're just going to roll with that. And I don't know if it's because Justin Fields had a bad game against Northwestern and Alabama. It's probably the Cats that did it, but everyone just decided all of a sudden that the Jets were taking Zach Wilson, and no one's really questioned it since then. And like Urban Meyer has hinted at the fact that they're going to take Trevor Lawrence. They haven't said it outright, but I haven't read a lot of stuff where like the Jets are hinting at Zach Wilson. And so it would surprise me, but I wouldn't be completely blown away if they come out and they're like, we're taking Justin Fields at number 2. But I just kind of wonder where we, as a collective sports media group, decided Zach Wilson is the number 2 guy, because he's had one really good season and that's it. I mean, that's the same way that Trey Lance is. It's the same way that Mac Jones is. And he's got some really good physical tools, and his pro day was really impressive. But Phil, I mean, I just don't know. I've seen enough to be like definitively he's the number 2 guy, and like he's definitely going to be the number 2 pick. If I were the Jets, I would be thinking long and hard about who I took at the 2nd pick.
I mean, I agree with Legwold when he says there's definitely a Mahomes effect all throughout the league. I mean, this could be the first time we ever see quarterbacks go 1 through 4 to start the draft. There's this need to find a guy who can do amazing things out on the football field, even if it requires a lot of projecting. I think when you look at Trey Lance, you're like, this guy has the tools that he eventually could become this great quarterback. Let's take the risk, because we need somebody like that if we're going to be able to compete in the AFC West, if we're going to be able to win a Super Bowl. There's definitely a Mahomes effect here where you're like so desperate to find somebody like that, instead of just being like, look, let's make a really strong roster here. Let's really fill all of our holes. Let's get the best player available. That notion kind of goes out the window when you're talking about quarterbacks. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if Leggy's been doing this a lot longer than I have. He's been doing almost as long as you have. But the Mahomes, I mean, it's always been like that. Like if you look at the AFC, there was a period of time, it was like a 15-year stretch where like Peyton, Brady, Roethlisberger, or Flacco were the only quarterbacks who had represented the AFC in the Super Bowl. The only ones over like 12 years. So it's, or 15 years or something ridiculous. So it's not like the Mahomes effect is new. It's always been, if you have a dominant quarterback, that's what you need. And the teams that have really solid rosters, maybe you're around 1 year, you compete 1 year, but you can't consistently, and maybe even you can consistently challenge for wild card spots, but you're not going to consistently challenge for conference titles or Super Bowls if you don't have that guy. I mean, I know Tom Brady is the most accomplished quarterback of all time. I'm not saying he's the best, but he's the most accomplished. But the Patriots roster was just not good at certain times, and they made what, Phil, 9 consecutive AFC title games or something like that?
Yeah, but even with those guys, there was some thought of like, oh, maybe it's Belichick and like he's just like a mastermind and like it's not like
We thought that with Peyton Manning.
That too. We thought, okay, we thought Peyton Manning was amazing. I'm saying we thought that the Patriots, like, you didn't know if that was like Brady or if that was Belichick or like, I think we got the answer.
I think we know.
I think the weird thing about Mahomes is just he's so young. You could say he's not even hit his prime. I think that there's just a weird effect there where you're like, this guy's so good, so young. He can make plays on the field that we've never really seen before. Maybe John Elway was doing that stuff, but we haven't seen some of the things that he's doing this young at this high of a level.
Did you just compare Patrick Mahomes to John Elway? There was a time, Phil, where that comparison would have hurt you.
It does still hurt me, but you got to face the facts at some point that this guy is amazing. So
yeah.
I do think that that's why there is some effect there. And,
I think that you always find a quarterback that comes in and, you think this guy is going to be the best and he's going to win MVP year after year after year. I mean, people thought that, like, I'm not going back that far, but like when Andrew Luck came in 2012, there was this thought that, like, once Rodgers and Brady and Manning retired, like, this is going to be Luck's league because he's the most talented guy in a long time.
He's like Trevor Lawrence. You can't miss.
Right. And it's kind of funny because Rodgers and Brady are still playing and Andrew Luck hasn't played in 2 years. But you think that about Andrew Luck, and then Patrick Mahomes enters the league. And then, Josh Allen plays well. And then you find Justin Herbert plays well. Every year there's going to be a guy that can challenge for that top 10 type quarterback. And there's going to be probably, the odds are, one of these guys in this draft, maybe even two, because it's a really special draft, will do the same thing. It's just, can you identify which one of them it's going to be?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you look at Zach Wilson, you see him on his pro day, he's rolling to his left and he just flicks his wrist and it flies 60 yards down the field. And you're like, that's the number 2 pick. Like that's how some of these things, yeah. I mean, that's how people are like, this guy looks like he could do some Mahomes stuff. Let's get this guy. This guy looks like Aaron Rodgers. Let's do it.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's what it feels like to me sometimes. Where, meanwhile, you've got like maybe some generational type talent at wide receiver or at a tackle position, and it just doesn't matter. It's all quarterback.
It is all about the quarterback, and until you have a great one, you are not going to consistently be in the playoff race or be in the division title race. And
you could be in the playoffs, but you're not going to be like contending for Super Bowl.
Right. You can be the Raiders with Derek Carr and get to the playoffs every couple years.
Wow.
You're not going to have the chance to win a title unless you have an absolutely dominant defense. And we've seen 4 or 5 of those in the history of the game that qualify, that can carry an offense to a title. Otherwise, you need that guy. And that's why, for the Broncos, as you're considering who to take or if to trade up, you not only have to decide if Drew Lock can get better, but can Drew Lock be a top 10 guy? He can't just be a top, in my mind at least. If you look at Drew Lock and you say 15, league average is where he's probably going to get to, or somewhere around there, then to me, you got to make the move and get one of these guys with potential. And just, it might work out, it might not, but you've got to take that chance, because I think you need a guy in the top 10 to have a chance to win a Lombardi trophy. And Phil, we know here how important that is and that that's the goal. Some teams, that's not the goal. I truly believe that some teams aren't super interested in, they do what they have to do, but are not going to sacrifice everything. I think the Broncos are committed, because of Mr. B's legacy, to making sure that they are always pushing toward that.
Nice little blow by that blast of the Raiders there.
I just
stuck in a blast, and then you just kept going.
They're not worth spending a lot of time on.
I know some of our friends in Las Vegas are listening, and they're like, okay, that's going to be on every radio station in Las Vegas.
Yeah. I think the Raiders have been in the news enough lately. Maybe they just sit this one out.
Okay, that soundbite's going to be in there too. Yeah, that's going to be in there too. Eric, let's get to some bold predictions here as we start to wind down this episode, our final episode here before the 2021 draft. Eric, let's hear it. A bold projection.
Okay, so I'll do one for the draft as a whole, and then I'll do one for the Broncos. I think for the draft as a whole, we've talked about how important quarterbacks are. We've talked about how there could be a historic run. I don't think Trey Lance is going in the top 10. I think I think that despite all the brouhaha and the noise, I think that you could see a scenario where Mac Jones goes 3 to the 49ers, the Falcons, the Bengals, the Dolphins all take position players. The Lions, maybe somebody trades up there for Justin Fields. Maybe it's the Broncos. Maybe Fields falls to the 9. But I think Trey Lance falls out of the top 10, and then a team like New England maybe moves up a couple picks to get him, or Chicago goes up a few picks. But every year, Phil, we hear about how there's going to be this run on quarterbacks. I mean, when Drew Lock was coming out 2 years ago, you had Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, Dwayne Haskins, and Drew Lock. And people were like, these 4 guys could all go in the top 12. And Haskins went 15 and Locke went 42. I mean, somebody drops every year, it feels like. And that same kind of thing happened the year that Baker, Darnold, Josh Allen, and Josh Rosen went. And they all did go in the top 10, but a little bit later. So that's my bold prediction for the league, is that I don't think Trey Lance will go in the top 10.
Didn't just 20 minutes ago you say the Broncos, if Lance is available at 9, take him?
Well, I think they're going to take Fields in this case. They'll either trade up.
In this case, you're just talking about in your bold projection.
No. Yeah, I think. Well, that's part of the bold projection. As I think the demand on quarterbacks will be less than expected.
Got it. Okay.
So Jones goes 3. The Broncos either at 7 or 9 take Fields, and then there's not another team that comes in to get Lance.
Interesting. Yeah. That's interesting.
Keep up, please.
I think quarterbacks will go 1 through 4 for the first time ever.
Wow.
That's my bold projection. I think that there's a lot of
not a good one.
Okay, well, that's the first time it's ever happened. And a lot of people, like you've alluded to, said the Falcons are going to take Kyle Pitts, the tight end from Florida. I'm saying 4 quarterbacks, top 4 picks.
There's like a 50-50 chance this is going to happen.
Yeah.
50-50,
huh? Is that what you're saying?
You need one thing to go
50-50?
right. You either need the Falcons to take a quarterback, or you need a team to trade up. That's all you need to happen.
Yeah.
Because 3 quarterbacks are definitely – you want to say that like 3 quarterbacks are going in the first 3 picks?
No, that wouldn't be bold. That's pretty much a slam dunk.
Got it. Give me 5 and 5, and then I'll be impressed.
I think maybe 5 and 10. I think maybe 5 and 10.
That's also not bold. George Payton said that at his press conference.
Yeah, that's a bold statement he made. He made a bold statement. Eric, I'm going to go ahead and jump you here, and I'm going to do my bold projection for the Broncos. I think the Broncos are going to take a running back in the 2nd round.
It's not bold either.
It's bold.
No, it's
a running back. A running back, Eric?
Yeah, there's some great running backs out there.
Yeah, and I think they're going to take one of them in the 2nd round.
Wow, that's not that bold.
Okay, I think they're going to take a kicker at 9. That's what I think. Yeah, McManus, watch out.
That's bold. I like that.
Is that bold? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. You want bold? Ready?
This is going to be some weak, light coffee, light roast, soft projection here. Let's go.
I think the Broncos are going to take a wide receiver with one of their top 4 picks.
Okay. There's a difference between bold and just like crazy.
It's not that crazy.
Oh, it isn't. Okay. Explain it.
It's another really well. You didn't even really explain your running back one because it wasn't that bold. People have already read this on the internet, so they don't even need to listen to you because they're like, oh yeah, I read that 3 weeks ago. The wide receiver.
Is that a running back?
Yes, there's plenty of mock drafts that have plenty of mock drafts with the Broncos taking a running back.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. But
Michael Carter, Javonte Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, basically just drafting
Javonte. Yeah, I like that Javonte Williams.
Yeah. Anyway, the Broncos at wide receiver, you've got Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton, who are very proven players, but Courtland could be a free agent after the year.
But we already heard that George Payton has said that he's going to be a priority.
Sure. Exactly. But you still got to either sign him, still got to sign him or franchise tag him, so it's uncertainty.
So that dismiss that comment. Okay, the next one?
No, because it's uncertainty.
Okay.
You are not sure what you are going to have at a KJ Hamler because of injuries last year, though I would think they still hope for big things. Deshaun Hamilton is about to be a free agent, and I would expect that he is going to be probably gone. Someone mentioned him in trade rumors a few weeks ago. Tim Patrick.
We've already read that. Okay, so keep going.
Tim Patrick, who is a really good player last year, is going to be an unrestricted free agent after this season, and it's quite possible he moves on to get a big contract somewhere, because I would doubt that the Broncos are going to pay Courtland Sutton and Tim Patrick, knowing that you've got to pay other guys coming up like Bradley Chubb. So all that to say is that you have Courtland Sutton, you have Jerry Jeudy. Other than that, you've got an unproven guy in KJ Hamler who you've invested a resource in, but if a receiver who's good falls to the third or fourth round, it really wouldn't surprise me to see the Broncos add to their depth there, because you need a lot of good players at that position.
That would surprise me, Eric. That would be a big
That's what a bold prediction is supposed to be.
Yeah, but it's a little bit crazy also. I mean, I think that it's a little bit crazy. I think that the one other way you could talk about the Broncos wide receiver room is that they've got a Pro Bowler in Courtland Sutton.
I mean, off an ACL injury.
They've got one of the most elite young wide receivers in Jerry Jeudy that they're really high about.
Yep.
They're really high on KJ Hamler. I mean, think back to the Panthers game when he had those 2 huge touchdowns.
Yeah.
I think that they're really high on him. So those are 3 wide receivers that you think are upper echelon type of guys. Okay. And then Tim Patrick is coming off.
Do you think KJ Hamler can be a number 2 receiver in this league?
Yes, most definitely.
Okay.
I could.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I
don't know if he's shown enough to prove that yet to me.
And then you've got Tim Patrick, who's just coming off of a breakout season where he's proven that he could be a legitimate wide receiver in this league. So that's 4. Okay. And then Tyree Cleveland was good last year at times, and maybe they think he could take a step. Maybe they think that, he could work on parts of his game. Maybe he could be a special teamer, find a way for him to get on the field. And they still have Deshaun Hamilton.
Special teams.
Yeah.
The draft is also about preparing for the future, right?
Yeah. They could draft a wide receiver then after they dealt with these issues next year.
They might do that too.
Yeah. But as far as this season goes, they're probably set at the position.
We just know this is a really, really good wide receiver class. People are saying it's better than last year's. And so if you get to pick 114, for example, and there's still a really good player on the board that's, or late in the 90s, and you want to trade up to get somebody, I mean, that could be worth it. I'm just saying that I wouldn't necessarily. This is not one of those positions where, like, at left tackle, you have Garrett Bowles, and so you're not going to spend like a high pick on a left tackle because you only need one of those guys. You might spend a late round pick.
When you're looking at this Broncos roster as a whole, there are needs that are more pressing than wide receiver. So maybe in your situation, it would make sense if they trade back, they acquire a couple of extra picks here.
Maybe you get a 3rd round pick and then you capitalize on Tim Patrick's trade value.
Yeah. Possibly.
I love Tim Patrick. I hope he gives great press conferences. I hope he doesn't go anywhere. But
I would say ahead of wide receiver, despite all of your points, I would say
despite the things I'm saying that make a lot of sense.
You need a quarterback, right? Probably. You need offensive lineman who's like a swing type of guy for next season. You need that. You need probably a running back for next season. You need a safety to back up Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons. You need a linebacker. That's 4 positions of much greater need.
When the YouTube commenters say that I don't like you, it's because you like Phil.
Those positions they need to address that much more than wide receiver.
Sure, that's why it's a bold prediction. We're not talking about like things that I think are going to happen 100%. This is like go out on a limb here and say something that people can't expect, so that if on day 4 of the draft they take a receiver, somebody says, "Oh wow, Eric thought of that." Whereas on day 2, if they take a running back, you're going to be like, "I heard that from 300 people that was a possibility."
Did you not hear me say they're going to take a kicker at 9?
Yeah, if that happens, I'm going to be like, "Wow, Phil knew it before anybody." But that, like, okay. I agree with you. There are a lot of needs that are more pressing than wide receiver. Of course there are. Yeah. But I think that wide receiver, if you look down the road and how this position group could change very quickly next year, it could be something to consider. But yes, linebacker, offensive tackle, defensive line, cornerback, safety, all those positions are bigger needs, but we rarely see teams go through a draft and just address needs in order.
Yeah. Yeah. You obviously have to weigh, like, hey, this guy in a normal draft would be a 2nd round pick, but he's sitting here.
He's here at 71, and this is next year our receiving core could be just absolutely incredible.
I would be surprised. I would be really shocked. And you know how you were saying, oh, maybe a commenter would be like, oh, I heard Eric say that. That same guy could also be like, I was listening to this podcast and some idiot was talking about taking a wide receiver. Yeah. That could also happen.
Yeah. And then this other guy will be like, hey, I was listening to this segment called Bold Predictions, and Phil Milani had no idea what the word bold meant, and he kept talking about how it wasn't going to happen.
I think that if they draft a wide receiver in the 2nd round, or a running back in the a running back in the 2nd round, that's pretty bold, because people would be like, okay, you can find great value at the running back position later on in the draft. You saw what Philip Lindsay did as a CFA. You can find talent later on. And they could also say they let Lindsay go. They didn't prioritize what the running back position could do. They don't really value that. And then if they go ahead and take a guy in the 2nd round, that's pretty bold, Eric.
The decision by them might be bold. It's not a bold prediction by you, because that's a bold prediction.
I haven't seen that. Okay. I've seen them taking linebacker Jamin Davis. I've seen those things.
I'll shoot you over one after we finish recording.
Thank you. I know that you love those 7-round mocks.
Yeah. Well, you've got to get to at least 2 rounds in order to see the 2nd round pick. You're like, wow, I haven't seen anybody pick at 40 in this 1st round mock draft I'm looking at.
I'm scouring the internet for the 300 people you've said have already claimed running back.
Yeah. So you want to hear? I'll give you a bold prediction. You can use this one, okay?
I look forward to it.
Phil is also predicting that the Broncos will pick a quarterback on day 2 that will then start at least 5 games in 2021. That's your other prediction, right?
Wait, what? I don't know what you're talking about.
That would be an example. That would be an example of a bold prediction.
Are you feeling okay?
I'm not making it, but I'm telling you that's what an example is.
Oh, okay. Eric, let's go ahead and wind down here. Let's just take a second and breathe and get to some voicemails, Eric.
I forgot about this.
Yeah, get ready here. Yeah. Let's go ahead and play voicemail number 1.
Hey, guys. I'll make this short and sweet. First, love the podcast. Love how genuine you guys are. It's one of my favorite Denver Broncos podcasts to watch. But let's say we get to the 9th pick of the draft, and we have Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Micah Parsons, all on the board. Who would you guys prefer to pick? Because I really like the idea of, like, I doubt Justin Fields would make it to 9, obviously, but if he did, I think it's impossible for us to not grab him. But I also love the idea of Micah Parsons in the middle, because we have been missing a fast middle linebacker for many, many years now. So what do you guys think? And that aside, even aside from those 3 players, who is your dream player for us to take in the 1st round? Thanks, guys.
Okay, Eric. Well, we've talked about this a little bit, but if Trey Lance, Justin Fields, or Micah Parsons were all available at 9, what would you do?
Yeah, well, to unnamed voicemail lever, I think I would rank those guys: Fields, Lance, Parsons. Nothing against Parsons. I think he's going to be a really good player. Certainly would change the makeup of the Broncos defense. Bold prediction, I think the Broncos will consider a really good defensive player at some point in this draft. But I just think the upside of a quarterback is too much to ignore, and as far as dream player goes, I think Fields probably is that player for me. Realistically, Trevor Lawrence, if he was available, is probably the ultimate dream player, but that's probably not going to happen.
In this situation, I think that Justin Fields is definitely the pick. And the reasons why you don't go Micah Parsons there is because Patrick Surtain is probably also available. And if Parsons and Surtain are both available, I'm going Surtain. So that's why I wouldn't do Parsons there. And also, Legwold kind of mentioned this is if you get Justin Fields, now you've got some assets here. And you don't know what's going to happen with Drew Lock, but if you, for some reason, have two pretty good quarterbacks, like say Locke starts the season because you don't feel like Justin Fields is quite ready to go week one, and then Drew Lock plays really well, then you're just building assets because then you've got two quarterbacks in a quarterback-loving, obsessive league. So I think Fields.
Can I ask you, Phil? This is nothing against Drew. How often does that happen? Where you have a quarterback and then you draft somebody behind him, and then the quarterback ahead of him plays super well, and all of a sudden you have a trade chip. That doesn't happen very often.
It does not happen very often.
Tyrod Taylor in Cleveland.
I agree with you.
I'm sure they thought, hey, Tyrod came from Buffalo. He had a great year. If he plays well, we could be in great shape.
It does not happen
very out that way.
In fact, Eric, if I'm just telling you how I feel about things, I in general like it when you take a young quarterback and just play him. I like it when you just throw the guy into the deep end of the pool and let him learn, try and let him learn the mistakes while playing. It's one thing to learn things in the film room. I like just playing the guy, but I'm just saying, if you take a quarterback, you're going to have an issue there with Drew. So you're either going to say, we're going to trade him, or you're saying, we're going to let him compete with this guy. I'm not sure what the answer is there, but you're going to have a situation where you're going to have to address it somehow.
In that position, that position battle, if we get to it, we'll talk about it a ton, but that could be just as much about what Drew does. Like if Drew goes out in a preseason game and turns it over, and Justin Fields, you might just say, well, then might as well let Justin Fields play then, Well,
what if he lights it up? I mean,
well, yeah. If you draft a guy at 9, that guy is going to be your quarterback sooner rather than later. Yeah, we see that happen. It happened in Denver, and Drew was the 42nd pick. One thing I will say, I do feel a little bit bad for Drew because there was one of the things John Elway said at Drew's introductory press conference was, since he's not a first round pick, there won't be the pressure for him to perform right away. We can take things a bit more slowly with him. And I get that it's been 2 years, but he's only played 18 games, and now it's like he could just be done in 3 days.
Eric, one thing I've learned a lot about over the years is that sometimes whether or not you stick in this league, sometimes it comes down to just pure luck. Like if some of these quarterbacks are off the board and the Broncos decide, okay, it's not worth to go up, that's nothing that Drew Lock did, but in a way that means that he's the quarterback next year for the Broncos.
Yeah, so and then he could play well and earn a
have a good career. Yeah, exactly. So sometimes you just got to get lucky with what's going on around you and what's happening in the draft, and who knows what's to happen. But I'm not on the train like you are for the quarterback. I am not on that train. I think if they took one of these quarterbacks, I'd be intrigued and I'd be interested in seeing what happens, obviously. But I'm not like gung-ho about this the same way you are.
Well, I just want to be clear. I think Drew can be better. I think Drew will be better. I think Drew can play well enough to lead this team to a wild card spot next year if everything goes well. My only concern is, can Drew be a top 5, top 7, top 8 guy in this league? And I don't know the answer to that. It's possible, but we would just have to see a lot more games strung together like he played against Carolina or Houston his rookie year. You just need to see a lot more of that more frequently. Whereas the potential to me of a Justin Fields or Trey Lance is really, really intriguing. So that's it. If the Broncos were sitting at pick 15 and we were just talking about Mac Jones, I would be all aboard the keep Drew for another season, see what he can do. that bandwagon.
If only they would have beaten the Raiders that final game.
Well,
then you would have been on a different bandwagon.
I mean, that's where the circumstances are just very, very different.
Yeah. Let's get to another voicemail here. This one is from Harry from San Diego.
And I'm just calling, just listening to your podcast. I'm still on the podcast, not YouTube yet. To say I definitely agree with Phil that if Trey Lance is on at 9, I'm no way I'm taking Trey Lance. I'm going to stick with Drew Lock. I'm just not interested in I've already seen Drew Lock's floor, and I don't think we've seen, really the fullest potential of his upside. And I'm not really interested in experiencing Trey Lance's floor. We don't know what his upside is or his floor is, but they're both scary to me. And then you can't keep both those quarterbacks. I mean, you could, but yeah, then you kind of have that, like I think you mentioned, Eric, that what if about Drew Lock. It's just it's a safer bet to me to stay with Drew Lock. So I often agree with Eric, but I'm taking Phil on this one for sure. So peace.
Eric, what did you think about that?
Well, anytime, I appreciate the voicemail from Harry. Anytime somebody says they agree with Phil, my antennas go up because I know something's not quite right. My question is, when Harry says, because his point is he doesn't know what Trey Lance's ceiling is, he doesn't know what Trey Lance's floor is, and that scares him. I get that. I would say, like they advise you in most rom-coms, you've got to just jump in. You've got to go.
Which one
first.
Is that you're talking about?
Any rom-com, really. I think they advise that.
Hmm.
But the thing with me is that when he says he's seen Drew Lock's floor, that's probably true. But Drew Lock's floor has been like the 32nd or 31st best quarterback in the league. And so I don't quite understand the argument of we've seen Drew Lock's floor, we've seen that and it's not good enough. And so, and everybody has, Drew Lock has said that, Vic Fangio has said that, George Payton has said that, Drew has to be better. And so the argument of like, we know Drew Lock's floor, we know he won't be worse than this. Well, yeah, but if he just plays like that, that's not good. So that to me is where I got lost a little bit. But thank you for the voicemail.
Yes. I would say the scary thing about Trey Lance would be like, you're doing so much projecting there where you could also just take a player like Patrick Surtain, who you figure is pretty much a slam dunk to be a starter in this league for a long time. And so you're like, I could get this starter at a really valued position for many, many years. Or it's possible this guy hits and it becomes a superstar in the league, but that takes a lot of projecting. That sort of balance is more so for me, where you're like, okay, we could add Surtain and also have Drew Lock and see if he improves and be a much better football team that way. Or you could get Trey Lance and let him sit for a couple of years or a year and just see what happens. I mean, Trey Lance is the one guy who I feel like you don't throw in the deep end. I don't know. Then he needs to play. So, I mean, I don't know.
That's the thing is he hasn't played much football, so he might just need to play. Yeah. I mean, I think the notion of an entire redshirt year is just kind of, I don't believe that really exists in the NFL anymore. I know it happened. He played at the end of the year, but
that was a redshirt year.
Mahomes did it, but that was a playoff team. So it was a little bit of a different situation. Let's say for any team that is picking in the top 10 by not choosing to trade up. So like if the Packers and Jordan Love, for example, it's a little bit of a different situation because Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback. But for a team that's drafting a quarterback out of need and not out of the future desire to have a guy, like it just doesn't really happen. And so I think if the Broncos drafted Trey Lance, maybe you decide to keep Drew Lock under those circumstances, but I would still be surprised if Trey didn't play a decent amount of the season just because you need to get him experience. And what you don't want to do is waste the most valuable commodity in the NFL right now, which is a quarterback on a rookie deal. And if you don't play Trey Lance until a year and a half into his career, you've just wasted, 30% or whatever of his rookie contract. And so to me, you've got to take advantage of that. And it doesn't mean you start him day one, but week 10, week 11, same way you did with Drew Lock, that to me has to be the, worst case scenario. You're giving him 5-6 games to play.
Did you say 30% of his rookie?
Yeah, 1.5 years. That's pretty close to 30%, right?
1.5 years? Is that what you're saying? You would just sit him? Oh.
Well, that's what you just said, 1 or 2 years.
Yeah. I thought you meant just the 1 year.
I was taking what you said, which was 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, sure.
1 year would be 20%.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were. I thought you sort of made a mistake there. I was gonna put that down on the list.
No, I didn't.
I agree. There's nothing more valuable than a quarterback on his rookie deal, but at the same time, you always have to balance, whether or not, like, if you throw Trey Lance out there and you know that this season's not going to go well, like, what do you tell the rest of the roster? Like, you can't just go into a season knowing, look, we don't have any shot here.
Well, yeah, that's why I don't think you throw him out there week 1 if you don't have to. But
yeah,
I mean, here's the other thing, Phil, is that say Drew Lock goes out there and plays okay again, better than last year, but maybe he throws 20 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, or throws for 3,500 yards or something like that, and they go 9-8 or 10-7 and get a wild card spot, and he's going into his final year. I mean, then you got to make a decision. Do we pay this guy, or what do we do? And are you going to be prepared at that point to give Drew Lock a huge contract? And if you're not, then maybe that goes into the decision of, hey, starting over with a guy on a rookie deal who has a 5th-year option, unlike a second-round pick, could be intriguing. So lots of elements to this decision.
Yes, there are. Anyway, thank you, Harry, for your voicemail from San Diego. 707 neutral is how you leave a voicemail. 707 neutral. Appreciate those there. Eric, let's wrap up the show with some shout outs. Anybody you want to highlight?
I think Liz Manis did some in-person community events. Very nice.
Liz Manis, that's great.
I'll shout out Tim Patrick, just because he did a little podcast with Utah talking about babysitting Garrett Bowles' son, Kingston. Very entertaining. Gave him some sports drink, gave him some chips, and then was very surprised when the child did not fall asleep. So Tim Patrick, I feel like he would be high on the list of people I would let babysit a child.
A little bit alarming, wouldn't you say, to not know how much sugar is in a sports drink?
I'll be honest. If I were thinking of like things that I definitely shouldn't give a kid before bedtime, a sports drink probably wouldn't cross my mind.
Yeah, don't give a sports drink to a baby.
Right, well, now I know. Now Tim Patrick knows. Like, I'd be like, don't give this kid candy. Don't give him soda.
Beer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I would be drinking that, but the rest of it, I'd be like, yeah, you can have a juice box. That's probably not good either, right? Too much sugar.
Bad.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have
milk maybe would be okay.
That's true. Yeah.
Eric, I was gonna do a shout out for China Jude, Broncos' new Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Welcome to the Broncos. A nice move there. Welcome her to Broncos country. So China Jude, shout out to China Jude. Also, shout out to all of the scouts that have really worked tirelessly to get to this point for the Broncos, trying to make the Broncos better here on Thursday. Hopefully you had a chance to watch Behind the Broncos, Eric.
Yes, Behind the Broncos, No Shortcuts, episode 3, debuting today. I think I'm posting this
as we're recording
Tuesday. Yeah.
It's as we're recording. It's gonna come out in a couple of hours here, but most people are probably listening to this on a Wednesday. So
yeah,
we could it's kind of a space-time continuum type of thing, but hopefully when you're listening to this on a Wednesday,
it's on the internet somewhere.
Yeah, it's on the internet. Go check it out if you haven't already. You get a peek at how the Broncos go about this process. There's some categories that the Broncos check out when they're evaluating a player. Obviously, they look at the film and the measurables, and you got to hit there, but there's so much more that goes into it. You say what's this person's character like? Do they love football? What's their family life like? Who do they hang out with? What are they like in the weight room? I think one thing people don't know is how these prospects are being evaluated 24/7. I mean, all the time. What is this guy like all the time? They do that. They do analytics, of course. Scott Flaska is the main person there who's doing the Broncos analytics. And then they get to what we talk about most of the time, Eric, is how does this guy fit with the Broncos? That's what we talk about a lot. And they have to make a decision there too, where they decide, how does this guy get on the field for the Broncos? So a lot of interesting things there. So hopefully you enjoyed that episode, a peek behind the curtain there. So Eric, anything else? What do you think is going to happen?
You got it covered. I think Justin Fields is coming to Denver. I really do.
Okay. And I'm going to go with Patrick Surtain. That's my final. I'm going to go Surtain. You're going to go Justin Fields.
Yeah.
You want to put something on it? Like, what do you think?
I don't think that's allowed.
Yeah, it's not allowed. But maybe you could just like own up to, you could like maybe just say like, I was wrong. Like, you're right. Like, something like that could be nice.
That could be nice.
Some praise, maybe.
I would hold your breath.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week. We'll know what happened. We'll know how it all unfolded. We'll break it down. We'll probably hear from the Broncos' first overall draft pick and see what he's all about. That's next week on the Neutral Zone, Eric. Do you think we'll do a surprise episode? Do you think we'll do a breakdown?
I don't know. Maybe. Could be. We'll have to see.
We'll have to see what happens. So, and once again, our thanks to Jeff Legwold for spending some time to chat here. ESPN senior writer, Jeff Legwold. That's going to do it for us. For Eric Dalala, I'm Phil Milani. You've been listening to
The Neutral Zone.